Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Riv Readers podcast and our first episode of the new school year. I'm your host, Katie McFarlane. This episode, we're wrapping up our library staff series with our Electronic Information Librarian, Jonathan Fowler. So thank you, Jonathan, for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
The last of our summer staff series for this summer. And then we're hoping to pick it up next summer, get some more of the library staff that we didn't get a chance to interview this summer.
Still lots of good ones left.
Yes, definitely. It was hard to pick.
I'm sure.
So what have you been up to this summer, either for work or outside of work?
Let's see, at work. So as the Electronic Information Librarian, dealing with our databases and paying a lot of bills, a lot come due during the summer. So that's been a big part of it.
Right.
Making sure our subscriptions are all up to date and everything's working.
Mhm.
The ERC, having moved that down to the Regina Library.
Yep.
Just making sure everything's all in line as far as that goes. Outside of school or work, I've been traveling a little bit and lots of concerts and whatnot. Got a music festival coming up this week that I'm looking forward to. One last little getaway before we get going on the new school year.
Do you have a concert tally of how many this summer?
For this summer, it has not been as much as perhaps in the past. Probably 6 or 8, but that's because we've had 2 festivals.
True.
Haven't gotten to as many like one-off shows because we had big weekend. We did 2 music festivals.
So that's not all the same artist. It's like there'll be multiple artists.
The one coming up is just one artist, that's Fish. So that's just them for 4 days. But the other one we went to was, I think, 30 or so bands across the weekend. Yep.
But like all one kind of genre or?
No, they were kind of all over the place. They
Yeah.
sort of get lumped in. It's a terrible genre name that I hate using, but they sort of get lumped into the jam band
Oh, sure.
genre. But that could be anything from jazz, funk, bluegrass, regular sort of straight up rock. So yeah, I mean, even there's a lot of diversity among that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. 4 days of Fish. How did they fill that up? They have that many albums?
Oh gosh, it's been over 40. I mean, they've been around over 40 years. They just released, I think it was album 21 or so. But this is nothing. They did in 2017, they did 13 shows at Madison Square Garden where they did not repeat a single song.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So 13 straight shows with not one.
That's
one
impressive.
repeat. Yeah.
And to be able to play all that from memory.
Well, yeah, that's the other. There were some covers. It wasn't all their stuff. There were covers mixed in. Each night was a different donut flavor or theme. So they kind of brought in different things. Like they had a Boston Cream night where they played both Cream songs and Boston, the band Boston, and other things. Yeah, so it was fun.
That's awesome. Yeah, because you and Megan are our concert goer extraordinaires on staff.
She's got me beat, I think, on the number of shows this year, but I might have her beat on the number of artists because of the festival.
Do you have a competition?
Well, we both have our spreadsheets, but in the big scheme, and I've done a lot of festivals over the years, so mine, and I tell her, like, I don't know how to sort of tally that up, because if I've seen, I think it's something like 700 shows, but like a bunch of those are festivals where they were really just over the weekend and packed in.
Now, did you start your spreadsheet? Did Megan prompt you to start your spreadsheet?
Yes, she did. Yeah, I still had all my ticket stubs. Well, most of them anyway. Yeah, I'm sure there are a couple of things missing here and there, but I think it's pretty accurate.
That's 700. Unbelievable. Wow. Moving into reading.
Okay. My next favorite thing.
Yeah. I definitely did gear these questions to pick your English teacher brain.
Okay.
So I'm sorry for this.
No, that's all right. That's what.
For those who don't know, Jonathan taught English for 20 years.
20, yep.
High school English. Yep. Yeah. So figured we could take advantage of that, but definitely also your personal opinions.
All right.
So is there a book that you think should be required reading for everyone?
No, I don't think so. Reading is such a personal thing that I think it's important, and especially having been an English teacher, it was the sort of paradox of wanting to encourage kids to read and get kids to like reading, but at the same time recognizing that my forcing of titles and things, the curriculum, onto kids sometimes had the opposite effect of what I wanted. So it was kind of hard to find that balance. And one thing I learned, like, I don't know that there's something that should be required reading. In thinking about this question, though, a couple of the things that kept coming to mind were children's books, things that are going to start people down the road
Yep.
for reading. And that's always, or at least one of the things I often think about for myself was how reading was instilled in me at a young age,
Yeah.
and it really mattered which books. And my parents, fortunately, were pretty good to let me explore and whatnot. But I kept going back, like that's when and what often gets kids hooked on reading is
Yeah.
finding it at a young age. So in thinking sort of along those lines, there were a couple things that are fun and get kids engaged in that way. So Dr. Seuss, like The Giving Tree or something like that would be one that I
Yep.
could argue that all kids should be exposed to. The Little Prince
Oh, yes.
is a good one. Goodnight Moon was another one that came to
Yep.
mind. I'm trying to think of like those kinds of things. And then once you get out of that, I mean, I might sort of argue that everybody should read Hamlet or everybody
Sure.
should read for a long time. And I've gone through it, I think twice myself. The Bible, I think, is one that people, but I don't know that that should be required for everybody. I think you have to
Sure.
kind of find it on your own or whatever, but there are things that can be taken from it.
Yeah, and like for that broader cultural understanding, there's
Yeah, and I remember I had a college professor that said in order to understand American literature, you have to read the Bible. Like there's
sure.
so much ingrained in it. Doesn't mean you have to agree with it or believe it or practice religion in some way, but just
Right.
to be culturally aware of the Bible and its impact on
Yeah.
pretty much every book that's come since.
To be able to understand where they were coming from and
Right. And there are so many thematic things, like even, I mean, this is a little on the nose, but like Steinbeck's East of Eden,
Mhm.
which is one of my favorite books. You can read it on one level with no knowledge of the Bible, and it's a fine
Mm.
story. But then the more you understand and see what he's doing with the Cain and Abel story and everything else,
Yep.
just adds that much more to it. And you can appreciate
Right.
his abilities and whatnot that much more if you do understand it.
Yep. That was like I read The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe
No,
when I was in fourth or fifth grade. Completely went over my head that like it was an allegory. And
allegory. Yep.
then afterward, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes so much more sense.
Yeah. That's another one that I might put on that should read because
Yeah.
that was huge. I'm actually rereading The Magician and His Nephew, which
Oh,
was one of the
nice.
later ones that was before The Lion and the Witch and the Wardrobe,
Right.
right?
So there's the two timelines, right? There's the chronologically when they
When they
happened
were, yep,
versus when they were actually
when they were
written.
written, right?
Yeah.
And there was one, The Boy and His Horse
Yeah.
is the one I have to read next that I never read. I don't know if they were in the little set that I had.
I think they're doing maybe a Netflix
Oh,
series,
really?
a new one that they're like revamping it.
Oh, makes sense. They could probably get more
Yeah,
into a series.
exactly. More detail and depth.
Yeah, yep.
So when you were teaching, did you try to give your students any leeway or was there any flexibility in terms of like you read a little bit of like what you want to read?
Yeah, at Pinkerton where I taught, our literature and writing semesters were sort of split,
Mhm.
for especially for junior and senior year. So American Lit was all one semester, and then there was the writing half, and then British Lit was senior English one semester, and then the argument.
Okay.
So they were always doing both throughout the year. So in the writing half, that was where they got the most leeway. They would have to be reading stuff, but they got to kind of pick what they wanted to read. Because of the curriculum, it was a little more structured in the literature semesters, but there was still
Sure.
room for the 20th century novel piece of the curriculum. They got to pick what they wanted to read for that. And we had a short story unit where they had a bunch that they could kind
Oh,
of pick
cool.
from, but then we did have the core
Yep.
stuff that we did read.
And did you get to pick kind of what you wanted to do out of those? And were there any like
Yeah,
favorite?
no, for the most part, teachers had the freedom to kind of do what they wanted within, there were some, again, like Gatsby in American
Sure.
Lit was always kind of a given. But aside from that, there was a lot of flexibility. We kind of went chronologically for the most part. So within each era, we could kind of pick what pieces we did within there.
And did you have any favorites or ones that you were like, I absolutely must teach this. I love teaching it.
Over 20 years, I tried to mix it up a bit because if I got bored with something,
Yeah.
it kind of came through. So it would have to be something, but Gatsby was one that I always did and always wanted to do. I never get tired of it. I did take breaks from it, but the Crucible was another one that was
Mm,
just fun to do most of the time. And I enjoyed doing that with the kids, having them read it and sort of, I don't know if act it out is quite right, but at least read it
sure.
out loud. There's a lot, I think, in that story as well. Besides just the sort of surface witch hunt story, there's still a lot of thematic
Yeah.
things in there to discuss.
Yep.
Oh, Scarlet Letter, I did every year. That was a required
Yep.
text with our advanced level. from a student perspective, I might have skipped it if I could have some years, but
Uh-huh.
it's another one that the more I read it, the more I grew to appreciate it. And
Sure.
so I would try to come at it. I know it's hard for
Right.
students. It's not an easy read, but if we can get past that, a lot of them were interested
Hmm.
in the story. The individual versus society is always a
Sure.
classic conflict. And then there was that period when Easy A came out.
Right. That you have a
Like
modern
there was, yeah, that
adaptation.
they were into it a little bit more because of that, which was
Totally.
nice. And that was a good, interesting take on that story and its
Yeah.
role in American culture even today.
Very cool. Ooh, okay. This is a tough question.
You take a drink.
Are there any books that you find overrated or underrated?
It's another one that, again, depending, it's so much of its personal preference that
Hmm.
I don't like to say something. I might find something to be overrated, but that doesn't mean that it is.
Sure.
It tends to be like the book du jour kinds of things that pop into my mind when I think about
Uh-huh.
over underrated. The ones that kind of get caught in the zeitgeist.
Sure.
And I'm like, all right, I got to read it. Everybody's reading it. Everybody's talking about it. And then
Right.
I'm like, why? What? I don't understand. What this was just like Eat, Pray, Love was one that came to mind, which
Sure.
fine book. Like there's nothing necessarily wrong with it. I don't understand why it got to the level that it got in
Right, like
terms
the
of
hype
popularity
built
or
up
hype.
around it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The Da Vinci Code was another one.
Yeah.
Things like that. Oh, The Notebook I used to fight with my kids a lot.
Oh,
Nicholas
yes.
Sparks in general.
Yeah.
That I tend to find grossly overrated, but people
Uh-huh.
like it. And
Yeah.
we all have our beach reads or our,
Yep.
like for me, that's Stephen King or
Sure.
whatever that I like reading, and it's light and not everything has to be deep and
Yep.
artistic and literary or whatever. But
Kind of like that guilty pleasure
yeah, yep,
vibe.
that's another good, yeah, term for it.
Now, how about on the flip side, underrated? Things that didn't get as much hype as they should have.
There's one writer, but he gets a lot of attention. I just don't know, like in America or
Hmm.
whatever. Haruki Murakami is
Oh, yeah.
one that I love. He did 1Q84, which is like this sort of riff on 1984.
Hmm.
He also did Kafka on the Shore is a great book. The worlds and the atmospheres that he creates are so different than anything I've read before. And I don't know why more people don't read it, but yet at the same time, he is talked about. His name gets thrown around in the Nobel discussion every so often.
Yeah.
So like people know about him. I don't know if he's underrated, but I don't know if he's as appreciated as he could
Yeah.
or should be.
Sure.
Um,
I guess, okay, we're still on theme a little bit, and then I'll move more into like your personal reading habits.
okay.
Is there a book that you think everyone misunderstands or misinterprets?
Gatsby is
Mm.
one that kept coming to mind just because if I see one more like, oh, we're throwing a Gatsby theme to prom or a Gatsby theme to this or that, I'm like, you completely missed the entire point of the consumerism, the materialism. Fitzgerald was not portraying the parties as these cool things that were happening. So I think like the glitz and glamour that
Right.
Gatsby kind of encourages, I guess, unintentionally, in people today. Catcher in the Rye is another one. The idea of Holden as like this kind of cool, rebellious kid is sometimes misconstrued, and that he's
Hmm.
again sort of lost, lonely, broken.
Yeah.
But we look at him as like this rebellious character who ran away and
So
was,
almost like glorified where it shouldn't be.
yeah, yep, yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so moving more into your own
All
personal
right.
reading habits. How do you, as a librarian, I always find this an interesting
Uh,
question. How do you organize your bookshelves?
it's changed a little bit. I just got two new bookshelves in my room, so I've been
Hmm.
moving things around. I guess I go mainly by like I have a shelf that's like my classic American
Uh-huh.
section, and then within that it's alphabetical.
Hmm.
And if I have more than one work by the same writer, then it's chronological in there.
Okay.
Um, and then I have one shelf that's like my world lit, like
Hmm.
British and then French, German. I have a lot of Russian literature. I like Russian literature a lot.
Mm.
The American lit is sort of where my heart is, so that's my biggest
Okay.
section. But then I have like a nonfiction section where I have like all my music books, and then I have like my literary criticism type stuff, biographies of writers, literary theory, criticism,
Mm.
analysis type things. And then I have like history.
So you got a pretty extensive collection.
It's sort of problematic, I guess. I'm running out of room. I have like one small wall left. And once that has a bookshelf on, I will have no more. And then there's even
You'll
a
be
closet that's
surrounded.
floor to ceiling. But so that's kind of how they're largely arranged. And then for the most part, it's alphabetical by author
Okay.
once you're
Yeah.
within the sections.
Yeah, I feel like that it just makes the most sense because
Yeah,
for a while I had gone through the like group books by how they make you feel and then I was like, no, I need to be able to find it, if I'm
that's
looking for it.
yeah, yep. I've tried to do I guess it was probably from looking at like Instagram or Book Talk or whatever. I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, if I put all my colored
Yeah.
jackets together and like I have my red, but then I don't know where anything is that way.
Right.
My brain doesn't work that way. So I'm like, nope. Yeah, it's not as fun, but
Yeah.
it's more effective.
Less fun, more
That's right.
functional.
Yep. The librarian side of me.
Yeah, no, I've really like streamed down my book collection
Yeah.
because I feel like, am I actually reading these? I'm
Well, and
very,
that's while I was rearranging this last round, I did get rid of 2025, or I haven't gotten rid of them yet, but I put them aside for getting rid of.
Mhm.
So I was trying to do some of that, but then I couldn't bring myself to do more than that. I was trying. I'm like, nope, I can't get rid of that. I might read it
Well,
again.
what is it? If it brings you joy, right?
Yeah, well, and there is a part of it that I do look at books sort of aesthetically sometimes. Like
Yeah.
a house isn't a home unless it has
Oh,
books.
yeah.
So there is that part of it where I need to be surrounded by them for whatever reason. Makes me
Totally,
feel safe.
totally understandable.
When
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with everybody outside of my walls, I have all my friends inside the walls.
Do you have a favorite quote from a book?
Yeah, lots of them. My two favorite, I snapped pictures of them because I wasn't going to remember the full quotes.
Right.
Weirdly enough, and I don't know if this would go on over or underrated or where it would go on that.
Mhm.
Because I know there are issues with it, but On the Road is another one of my favorites. And weirdly enough, the last page of On the Road and I think the last page of Great Gatsby is the greatest single page of American literature written fiction wise, ultimately ending with the "So we beat on, boats against the current, borne ceaselessly back into the past."
Mm.
But there's that whole long paragraph where he describes what it must have looked like for the immigrants coming to the New World.
Oh, sure.
But the one paragraph that I like, and as I sat there brooding on the old unknown world, I thought of Gatsby's wonder when he first picked out the green light at the end of Daisy's Dock. He had come a long way to this blue lawn, and his dreams must have seemed so close that he could hardly fail to grasp it. He did not know that it was already behind him, somewhere back in that vast obscurity beyond the city where the dark fields of the Republic rolled on under the night.
Wow.
And then it goes into he believed in the green light. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch out our arms farther in one fine morning. So we beat on, boats against the current, borne back ceaselessly into the past. And I don't know, I've never come across anything that it was sort of inspired by Gatsby or whatever, but the last part of On the Road,
Hmm.
um, Kerouac writes, so in America, when the sun goes down and I sit on the old broken down river pier, watching the long, long skies over New Jersey and sense all that raw land that rolls in one unbelievable huge bulge over to the West Coast, and all that road going along and all the people dreaming in the immensity of it. And in Iowa, I know by now the children must be crying in the land where they let the children cry. And tonight the stars will be out. And don't you know that God is Pooh Bear? That one line, I just love that. God is Pooh Bear. The evening star must be drooping and shedding her sparkler dims on the prairie, which is just before the coming of complete night that blesses the earth, darkens all the rivers, cups the peaks, and folds the final shore in. And nobody knows what's going to happen to anybody besides the forlorn rags of growing old. I think of Dean Moriarty. I even think of old Dean Moriarty, the father we never found. I think of Dean Moriarty.
Those two fit together so well too,
It's
because
one, yeah, like
yeah.
there's something about just the way they envision the land and like the
Yeah.
dream for both of them that's sort of there, but also just kind of out of reach. And
Like it really feels like it puts you in that place and
yeah,
picturing, the rolling hills and
yeah,
everything.
yeah.
Like,
And there's that line in the first part of the Gatsby. I became aware of the old island here that flowered once for Dutch sailors' eyes, a fresh green breast of the new world, which again just
mm,
kind of hits on the hills and the way it must
yeah,
look. But I'm like, did they know? Did Kerouac know that he was doing that? Was it intentionally an homage to Fitzgerald?
right. Sometimes it's not conscious level, like you're just,
Well, and he wrote right, like that whole thing. he wrote the entirety of On the Road in 2 weeks, like pretty much nonstop. Like it's all on one long scroll. Um,
Wow.
and so like he just was typing. Like there's almost no editing, which is, if you want to be picky, is one of the problems with it.
Sure.
It's that stream of conscious
Hmm.
sort of beat jazz kind of thing that he's doing. But so was he thinking about it, or was it just the same sort of spirit in both of them that got it there? I don't know.
That's really interesting.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I haven't read On the Road, so, and it's been a while since I read Gatsby. I think
Yeah.
it would have been high school.
That was why I just read
Yeah.
it this past year. Yeah, because it had been, I'm like, it's been 2 years. I haven't read Gatsby. I
Yeah.
never hadn't gone that long in 20 years. I need to read it. Uh,
Right. So I guess we're just down to the last question that I have.
okay.
What are the things that make you love a book?
Oh, that also depends. Usually character
Hmm.
is the biggest driving force. I have to connect in one way, or at least, I don't know if I have to connect, but they have to be developed enough that I can see what's going on. Not always. I suppose plot is probably least important. But again, that's not true if I'm going with, say, Stephen King book, or like one
Sure.
of those that we going back to the beginning. If it is just kind of a beach read or something that I'm reading for fun, then it's got to have a plot that drives it along, I suppose. Sometimes it's just the language.
Yeah.
I guess that would be like for On the Road. Like it's not a great plot story. Characters are sort of problematic,
Hmm.
but there's something in the way that he writes and the way the language is just propels you through the pages, the sort of poetry and the music, at least in that one, that is underneath it all, that I can overlook the problems because the rest of
Sure.
it's so great. I guess that's true with poetry.
Hmm.
The words, the language, the way it comes together. Love E. E. Cummings, plenty of others, but people who have fun with language, that's a big part of it. Well, that was my problem with Twilight. Going back to overrated, underrated, was
Sure.
like everybody was reading it, all my students were reading it. I'm like,
Yeah.
all right, I got to read this. There must be something to it if it's this
Yep.
huge. I could not get over just how terribly written it was. Like it's so badly written. She repeats. I went back and it's been forever.
Yep.
Where I read something on one page and then like 10 pages
Says the
later, I
same
swear I
thing.
read the same sentence. I flip back and I'm like, that is the same sentence there again. Like it just repeated these things. I'm like, I can't do it. Like even if, and I like vampire stories. Like I like Dracula is
Sure.
one of my favorites. But I could not handle what she was doing there. Sparkly vampires and
So I didn't plot this question ahead of time, but thinking about like, you've mentioned you read a lot of like American literature, but some poetry, like what are sort of, and obviously, your nonfiction and history and music.
yeah.
What are you usually reading? Like what are kind of the
Oh,
genres, the authors, like on a given
honestly, I
day?
usually have 3 or 4 books going at a
Uh-huh.
time, and it will be along that line. Like, because reading, for me anyway, is so much of a mood thing. Like, I can't just read a book.
Yes.
I mean, sometimes I can, and if I get caught up, then I'll plow through it. But there are certain times where I'm like, I'm just not in the right headspace to read a
Mm-hmm.
serious book or whatever. So I usually have, for lack of, I guess, a more literary novel
Mm-hmm.
going, something a little more serious. I almost always have a short story collection going so that
Mm.
if I don't have the time or the headspace to really sit down and read a novel, I can read a short story.
Yep.
And then I usually have a nonfiction piece going as well.
And then do you do all print pretty much?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really just my brain.
Yeah.
I have nothing against ebooks. I'm not against them in any way. However you read is important.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I can't. There's something I don't read the same on the screen. I don't retain
Sure.
things the same way. So I find myself losing track and not remembering things as well on a
Yeah.
screen. If we're traveling
Hmm.
and I don't want to pack 5 books with me, then certainly
What's wrong with
my ebook or
that?
my iPad is fine. I will do it sometimes, but if space is tight or
Yeah.
if we're carrying a lot, then it's perfectly fine. And I'll read on my phone. I forgot. I always have a book going on my phone that's different from
Okay.
the others. That's actually right now where I'm rereading the Chronicles of Narnia is just on my phone,
Okay.
like before bed. Sometimes it'll take me a week to read a page because I'll be
Yeah.
tired and I'll read a paragraph and fall asleep. And so that can take a while, but
The constant struggle of reading before bed.
yeah, and it does knock me out, which is
Right.
why like I don't do anything serious or anything that I really want to pay attention to before bed. Usually it's rereading things.
Yep.
Like that's how I reread Gatsby was on my phone because I'm like if I fall
Thanks.
asleep, It doesn't matter. I'm not going to freak out, or it's not going to keep me awake because I'm itching to know what's going
Right.
on. It's something that I'm comfortable enough with that I
Yeah,
can fall asleep.
those comfort reads.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's all the questions I had. Was there anything else that kind of like popped up in your head or anything else you wanted to talk about?
No, just read,
Read,
whatever
read,
you
read.
want. Yeah. What does LeVar Burton say? I feel like, don't take my word for it. At the end of
Wild. Oh
Reading
my
Rainbow.
gosh. I have to watch that documentary that they did.
Yeah, I haven't seen that yet either.
It's on my list.
Should be good. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you,
All right.
Jonathan.
Thank you.
If you'd like to follow us on social media, we are at Regina Library on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. You can always reach us through our website as well at riviere.edu/library. It's been great having you here, and we'll see you again soon.